What's up, friends, and welcome to Weird Westeros, where I go over weird histories, lores, and theories from A Song of Ice and Fire. Just because the show is over doesn't mean we can't still talk Game of Thrones. Today is part 4 of a mini-series covering the 4 weirdest structures in a Game of Thrones. Specifically, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the Black Wall. Now, before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to first say thank you to all of my new viewers and subscribers. I was a little shocked to see how many of you left comments on my previous videos, and I have really been enjoying hearing your feedback and your thoughts regarding my content. And I gotta say, I'm pretty flabbergasted at how much you enjoy the content, so I'm glad you like it, because I love talking about these weird and obscure parts of A Song of Ice and Fire, and maybe one day I might talk about why I fell off the wagon a bit, but I do plan to continue to make content for you all. So with that said, let's get into it. For today's segment, we will travel all the way to Old Volantis, where we see yet another structure made of fused black stone. Volantis is one of the free cities that we find in Essos. It is a large port city on the southernmost coast where the Rhoyne River touches the Summer Sea. Ser Jorah Mormont tells us this about Volantis. Volantis is the oldest and the first colony of Valyria. After the Doom, the Valentines tried to rebuild the empire under their rule. They failed, not least because the last Valyrian with dragons, Aegon Targaryen, entered the war against them. Now they are content to dominate only their lower classes, or so they say. After the doom of Valyria, colonies experienced a bit of chaos since there were no longer any centralized Valyrian leadership. Seeing the opportunity to seize power, land, and riches, the ancestors of the current leadership of Atlantis built armies to forge a new Valyrian empire. But, as Ser Jorah Mormont tells us, Aegon Targaryen, the last Valyrian with dragons, sided with Volantis' enemies and crushed their conquest. This struggle by the firstborn of Valyria, the Volantis of old, to reforge a new Valyrian empire became known as the Century of Blood and resulted in a decades-long series of chaotic wars between Volantis and the other free cities. Since then, the descendants of the Valyrians, the Old Blood, kept to themselves, only seeking to subjugate the lesser classes from behind their magnificent Black Wall, the main subject of our video today. It is a towering structure built some 200 feet high and built many centuries ago when the world was a different place and the old dragon lords were expanding their empire and were threatening to shape the world in their own image. This structure is nearly as wide as it is tall and can fit 6 4-horse chariots side by side. Because of this, Volantis conducts chariot races to annually celebrate its founding. Only scions of the Old Blood who can trace their ancestry to Valyria are allowed to dwell here in what they call the Heart of Atlantis, and inside of the walls you will find wonderful palaces, courtyards, towers, temples, cellars, everything you can imagine in a fortress. In the book A Dance with Dragons, chapter 14, Tyrion tells us that the Triarchs of Volantis, which is a title held by the 3 elected leaders of the free city of Volantis, once ruled Lys, Myr, and Volantis from within the Black Wall for 2 generations. But this ended when the Tiger faction of Volantis was eventually defeated by a coalition when they attempted to conquer Tyrok. Now, unless you are invited by an Old Blood, no foreigner is allowed in the Black Wall. Very few people are even allowed to vote for the Triarchs, but if you are a woman of good birth who dwells in the ancient palaces, you are allowed to vote. The Black Wall and those who dwell in it reinforce a class system for the people of Atlantis, and this causes many divides, including the gods that you worship. For example, R'hllor is the god worshipped and favored by the classes that live outside of the walls, who are typically slaves or freedmen, while the aristocracy living within the walls kept to the old gods of Valyria. Again, in A Dance with Dragons, we meet a famous, or one could argue infamous, freed person of Atlantis named the Widow of the Waterfront, who helps Ser Jorah Mormont and Tyrion Lannister travel to Meereen to meet Daenerys Targaryen. The Widow of the Waterfront is infamous because of her climb to power. At first, she was a pleasure slave who, while living in Yunkai, learned the way of the seven sighs. After some time, however, she was purchased by Vogaro, a triarch of Atlantis who fell in love with her. Vogaro freed her, and the two married, causing a great scandal in Volantis. The Old Blood disliked her so much, they referred to her as Vogaro's whore behind her back. And even after inheriting the wealth of her husband once he died, she was not able to live inside of the walls because no freed person is ever to have that privilege. The Black Walls are old and towering, but still serve a purpose to this day. But if there's anything we learn from history, the only thing for certain is change. Silhoris Cavo Nargaris reveals to us how Daenerys' smashing of the slave trade has affected those living behind the Black Wall. Behind the Black Wall, lords of ancient blood sleep poorly, listening as their kitchen slaves sharpen their knives. Volantis may be one of the more powerful free cities with the largest population, but 80% of that population is actually made of slaves, leaving the old bloods vulnerable to the will of many if they are not able to quell their powers of numbers and their need to be free. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will we see a slave rebellion in Volantis? Do the Old Bloods really have to worry about civil unrest? Or should they watch their backs at night lest they become victims to their own greed and need for power? Let's get some discussions going below. This channel is a passion project of mine. I created it long ago because I love Game of Thrones and I wanted to improve my communication skills through filmmaking. I've learned a whole lot since I've started my journey, and for those of you who have been watching since the beginning, you know that my videos have changed. That said, I hope you stay tuned to the next installment that I have in the works for you. Thank you so much and see you soon.